So the thing about life is that there is no plan, that it's ever fresh and it's always here now. That life itself doesn't know what is going to happen. And so all attempts of the mind to think it knows what is going to happen, create futures and ideas, is all some kind of limitation, because it's not the actual true nature of life. Life is unconditional and free and ever fresh. And life is living itself in that freshness. It's entirely emergent. It's alive and it's spontaneous and it's here now. And so as we open and deepen into their true nature, life is noticed to be more alive and fresh and spontaneous. Yes, there are dances that seem to be continuous, but in truth, life is not even in time and space. There's just this now, this now, this presence now. And all that is actually known here is the presence itself. The mind can think that it knows lots of things about this moment, and it can give labels and explanations and descriptions. But the truth is that all of that moves and changes. What is it that is here now, that is constant as the now? What is it that is here now, that never leaves, never changes, and is absolutely, reliably constant? Right? And in a way, this is what this inquiry and this life is for. This life is to realize what is true about this life, what is real about this life. And we find that in the unmoving, unchanging. And we open to the spontaneity and freedom of life living itself. Joyful, delighted, in constant awe and wonder of itself. Not needing to know. We could say realizing that any sense of knowing is in some way a limitation. That we're being invited into such an incredibly deep return to wholeness, to the knowing of the One, where all that is needed is to know the One. And to know the One, we come to be able to subtly perceive the mechanics and technology of the One, of light, of love, and realize that all of the ideas that the mind has about, well, but you need to know this, and you need to embody this, and you need to move in this way, is all just based in fear. That actually the One, the glory, God, doesn't need any of the ideas and attributes of the mind and what it thinks it needs in order to embody the unified awake field. All that is needed is to know and to be so attuned to the technology and the naturalness of how life itself, living itself, is keeping itself at the evolutionary edge. And we're never being invited to hover, settle, and kind of ground in a mental way. We're never being invited into any kind of limitation or constraint. There's an intelligence that we are, and an intelligence, a wisdom light that is moving everything, that knows. And when we are one with that knowing, as the one wide open heart, the technology of love, of openness, the intelligence knows. And really, we realize that we're just being carried. And there are many ways that we can hook ourselves in. There are many ways that we can intellectualize, many ways that we can take detours. And it's fine. It's totally fine. But what we're really being invited into is the wildness and the freshness and the spontaneity. And that when we are living in the wilds of life, living itself, everything about the life takes care of itself because the technology, the intelligence isn't hindered and conditioned and held back. And this is where we open to the infinite field of possibilities. And we're living, life itself is like a pure potentiality. Anything is possible. It's living in such a wild, evolutionary edge of its own unfolding, like on the edge of its seat. Wow, right? It's like life itself is right on the edge of its seat, not knowing anything but itself. And the knowing of itself is the knowing of the eternal, vital aliveness of life. That life itself is wild. It's not conditioned. It's fresh and free. And in a way, the play of the human life is a glorious exploration, an adventure, an inquiry, contemplation, a looking into life and unfolding the limitations that we have put upon life and using the play of life itself as a way of evolving and opening and shifting the resonant frequency field and the operating system of the lived experience from the operating system of fear and limitation to the operating system of wild freedom, of unconditional love, of the glory of God. And in a way, we have to say the word God because there's nothing else that resonates at the frequency of what God actually is, right? God is is the singular frequency. And so even if we have mental constructs and concepts that don't really like the word God, or it brings a little shiver or a little stirring, there's nothing else that resonates at the frequency because it is the principle of one. And in a way, we're being invited to open to resonate at the frequency of God. We're opening to recognize that our cells, our DNA, is wired to resonate at the frequency of God, right? Divinity, we could say, purity, innocence, wholeness. It's all the same frequency. But there's something about the ability of God to stir the soul into all kinds of gymnastics and glorious beauty. There's nothing like the frequency of God and the glory to bring forward everything that needs to be forward, even if it's a resistance. That's the glory of God, is to bring forward all of those deep, dark memories of a Catholic childhood and the punishing God, right? Even if it brings forward all those memories of the speaking of grace and, hypocrisy in family dynamics that that went to church and didn't behave like that behind closed doors, and whatever it brings forward, God is here as a frequency field of the One, as a universal principle of the undivided, to call us to the highest possible evolution in a human life, to realize the oneness with God. And in that we could say, here's Yeshua, right? What we could say is that there's always so much joy when that frequency of Yeshua just brightens the moment. Is that Yeshua is the blueprint, Yeshua is the template. And so again, even all the ways that we can be stirred by the idea of Yeshua, of Jesus, of Christianity, and rightly so, right? But ultimately, these frequencies, these mystical frequencies, are calling us to see something so profound that we have been given as a way, as a template, to know that our DNA is wired in the remembrance and recognition that we are children of God and that we are created in the image of God, right? We're created in the image. We're not apart from. There's an impossibility. And when we really open, what is right in the core of this is the true mystical revelation, is the true non-dual revelation. And we could say that that revelation is the heart of all traditions and lineages. And yet what we are invited into is a distillation through the alchemy of the light that we are, what we're made of, what we're wired for, the knowing of consciousness, the consciousness of consciousness, right? The wide awake awareness that is consciously wide awake and aware of itself, that in this revelation is everything, right? There can be a kind of flippant or nonchalant kind of, oh yeah, I know about presence. Oh yeah, I've had a revelation of that. But if that revelation isn't realized to be everything, that it's absolutely, even in its seed state, is the fullness of the unfolding, right? It's like the the acorn contains the whole unfolding of an oak tree, right? It's like that if we don't realize that the acorn, the seed of our remembrance as the still silent presence of now, contains the whole evolution into God. Wow, right? It contains the whole evolution into the glory of God. And that we are that, and we're wired for that in the consciousness that we are. We don't have anything missing. We're absolutely a fully comprehensive technology to unfold the totality in a human life. And yet we can spend so much of the human life believing in lack and living in limitation through belief and fear, identifying with the story, spending lifetimes trying to process our way out of limitation, when actually the resolution is right here in the wide open field of God, of the glory, of facing yourself in God, facing yourself in light, in love, facing yourself in presence, facing the seed of the awake knowing in the presence of now, and truly tending to the seedling, the sapling of the evolution by remaining at the edge in order to allow the human life to unfold at the edge, and then to lead from that edge, right? To be a living modeling of surrendered living, to be a living modeling of living at the evolutionary edge in the glory of God, right? This is what we are here for. We're here to be the map and the terrain. We're here to be the wildness of life that doesn't know in reality what this life is for in terms of particulars, but that we're willing to live at the edge and to then, we have to say, be willing to change, and for change to happen, that we're not here to grow old and crusty in the sameness of a life that feels comfortable. Well, unless that feels deliciously compelling, then sure, go ahead, right? But most of us will recognize that we're wired for something so much more rich and glorious, that we are a community of one, a global, nay, universal community of wholeness, of light, of glory. And we're here to glorify the glory. We're here to glorify what God truly is, and to actually distill the reality and actuality of that through the nervous system, through the consciousness that we are, and be a living beacon, a living frequency field that joins in the light as the light and becomes a constellation of reality that's spreading the light. And that could be silently as secret agents. But essentially, if we're living at the edge, then we become like illumined leaders in this revolution of love through the living of a human life. We become illumined guides and way showers in every single moment of the lived experience. We're modeling what it is to live this truth, to be at the evolutionary edge, and to leave behind the ways of safety that are false, to leave behind moving within the world of limitation, trying to fix and resolve the problem of me as a story field, right? That we can't fix the me in the story of me by trying to make a better me, a me that's seen, a me that's healed, a me that is understood. It will never, ever happen. It's such a wild thing that we'll never be seen by the ones that we want to be seen by, aka our parents, whether they are dead or alive, right? There's like a like a deep inner unconscious program to live the life in a kind of groove of, do you see me now, mummy? Do you see me now, daddy? Do you see me now, right? And even if they're way long gone out of their embodied human lives, that program can still be running. If we're trapped in the karmic obscurations trying to be seen in a field that will never see us because it is a karmic field. It's to see ourselves outside of the karmic obscurations, where we stop running those programs of trying to be seen and understood and successful, and to kind of leave legacies and all sorts of other egotistical bonkers things that we get involved in, that we realize that the only legacy is to leave this body with nothing left but a wildfire of glorious love, right? That's the living legacy of a human life lived in its fullness, that we go down in the fire of love, right? Because we realize that all that's really happening as we go down in the fire of love, singing the glory of God, is that we are just de-manifesting. we're just we're just dissolving back into the unmanifest, that nothing really changes, but that we're in a glorious celebration of of how did I do? How did I do in this manifest expression? And will I get a return ticket? Or will I be free to just glimmer and gleam in the light realms and still continue to evolve, right? So, what a glorious possibility to open to the revelation that somehow we have this possibility of being humbled and realizing that we have areas of the life that can be a bit crusty, a little bit stuck, and that no one is asking anything of us, not even the glory of God, right? We are completely welcome in free will to get cozy, get a big pair of slippers, right? And just hunker in for the rest of this life and watch TV and drink some good coffee and make some lovely meals and sit around the fire telling stories of the lifetime. Like, we are so welcome to hunker in. But we're here. We're here because we're here because there's something alive in the heart of every being that is calling us here. We're being called here by the glory of God. We're being called here by the light of God that is already aflame and blazing in the heart, whether it's recognized or not, because sometimes the mind can say, yeah, I can take it or leave it. But that's just a protection. That's just a protection. It's kind of like a teenager trying to look cool, right? But actually secretly being in love with, the girl next door. Yeah, I can take her or leave her. I'm not really interested, whatever, you know. But secretly, just the heart's longing. Will she see me today? Will she look up and smile, right? It's the same thing. Will God, will God respond and bring the fire alive in this heart today? Will the glory of my longing, can I dare to open up to such a longing? Will I be able to crack through the protections and layers of disappointment, the ways that I learned to be passive and good in order to get my needs met when I was a child, to not be too much, to be easy, right? The ways that we made these unconscious commitments, while the heart all along, absolutely without question, every heart is longing to be one with the one that is, and to truly be living in the resonant remembrance of the field of the one, to be in absolute true communion. So in the stillness, in the silence, in the wide open presence of this moment, the being that knows its own beingness, the presence that recognizes itself, is the seed, is that which is calling, and that which contains the whole unfoldment. That consciousness is already wired for the full evolution that a human nervous system is already fully wired and equipped for. Like, that's amazing, right? We're equipped and wired to unfold beyond the wildest dreams and imaginings that the mind can get to, because the mind can only reach the edges of its limitation. And as the mind reaches the edges of its limitation, it has to break orbit into pure awareness in order to go beyond the imaginings, has to break orbit into the pure consciousness, where the pure consciousness in the still silent field is wide open, and yet where the consciousness that is normally dancing as the mind and body, as the flow of intelligence and life, and calling the attention, pulling the attention towards the ebbs and flows and meanderings, that as we truly enter the stillness and the silence, as consciousness starts to relax and soften and fall into the still silent presence, it's like moving water that settles out and becomes like a still, clear lake. And in the still, clear lake of pure consciousness, awareness sees itself in its glory. In a way, the pure mind, the one mind, the mind of God, it remembers itself because it sees a reflection of itself and remembers the frequency of still, silent presence, just being, just being. It's like when you see a lake on a windy day, it doesn't look quite right. There's something not quite right about a ripply, jumpy lake. But there's something so right, so settling, so true about a lake that is still and glassine, that you can see the reflections in, right? It's true nature. It's nature showing us, like a ripply lake, beautiful, still beautiful, an experience, right? But there's something about a still, unmoving lake that brings a reflection that says, oh yes, the lake, right? The lake, right? We know it, just as awareness knows itself in the reflection of a consciousness that is still and silent and unmoving. There's a sense of the silent truth, the purity of consciousness, just resting in itself. And here we access the knowing of a consciousness that is consciously awake and aware of itself in its true nature, and recognizing that its true nature is just to be, just to be. Ah, lovely, right? Just to be here now. And yes, the habits of the mind to be jumpy and go towards this and go towards that and do this and do that, they can be residual, and it's what happens as we learn meditation and practices that settle out the mind consciousness and invite it into presence and stillness. But we realize that it doesn't matter, because the whole technology is here, awareness is here, and awareness can be aware of the mind waves, aware of the moving, changing, without identifying it and running with it as a story, awareness can just be aware of the moving, changing. And as awareness is aware of the moving, changing, it's like the focus to just be aware deepens without identifying and moving to the doer. The sense of being kind of grounds itself, just simply being. And in a way, it's about resting in this being so that we recognize in the knowing of the being itself, that true nature, as we really recognize this is the true nature. This is my true nature. This is what I am in truth. I am the I am presence. I know myself here in a deeper way than I know myself through the mind. And it's like resting here deeply enough to open up the knowing and the dynamic flow of the knowing and the intelligence that reveals a more subtle perception of life. In a way, it's like the acorn resting in itself, not kind of looking out like, oh, I wish I could be a tree. I wish I could be a tree. Oh, I'm just not good enough. I'm not a tree. I'd love to be a tree. But focusing all the attention on what I'm not and what I'm lacking, and just thinking about, like a little acorn, just thinking about all of the possibilities and how lacking I am and how there's something wrong with me, without realizing, just deep in the resting, in the still silent presence, in a subtle perception inside, oh, I actually have the full unfolding and I am actually a tree. I am actually a glorious tree, right? It's like that. And it's like the lake. Nature gives us all of the reflections of true nature when we just rest long enough, still enough, and we receive the frequency field deeper than the mind's habitual program to be in lack and deficiency, and just so activated to try to fix, try to work it out, or just be cycling in self-criticism, self-judgment, self-punishment, right? That when we come to the still, silent presence, that we start to recognize something about our nature that is deeper and more profound than we can really put words to. And even if we try to put words to it, we tend to realize that it doesn't really matter, because the peace, that sometimes would be spoken as passeth all understanding, it can't be given an explanation or words. It can only be known in the silence. It can only be known by itself. And as we rest in the peace, the still silence of a mind consciousness that is quietened, we start to realize the sanctuary of the heart. We start to open to the knowing of the being and the intelligence that is flowing within the knowing of itself, and the subtler perception that we have the capacity for. And in a way, that's the consciousness. It's the nervous system, the human nervous system, and the wiring of our consciousness that we think of as being kind of in our body is, of course, so much greater than just being in the body. That our brain well, all of our functioning, but our brain and our nervous system, the glandular system, the intelligence, the digestive system, all parts of the whole intelligent functioning, but as a resonant field of intelligence, all of our functioning within the sense of the physical realm is part of the field of intelligence. So our multidimensional living, our multidimensional bodies, we could say, are completely interactive as a field of intelligence that allows the unmanifest to be in manifest appearance through a multidimensional intelligence that brings about that manifest appearance. But what we are is not the manifest appearance. What we are is the intelligence that allows creation to happen and appear, right? And all of our function is a synchronistic, symbiotic relationship, multidimensionally. And in a way, the more that we open to the subtler realms of our functioning and the intelligence, we bring online the dormant, unused, untapped frequency fields of our consciousness, and we start to come alive at a much more subtle perception, refined perception, and a knowing in consciousness of what we are and what this life is. And then here we start to infuse the consciousness of the other dimensions of our being with that more refined frequency knowing. And we are able then to bring that frequency of knowing into an enlivenment, even on a cellular level, that can refine and rejuvenate the physicality and can refine and rejuvenate and clear the residues of the mental and the emotional field very, very quickly and easily as light transmission. And that we open to a way of functioning that isn't about years and years of trying to process and therapize our way out of our dysfunction, but we start to open out of the time and space capsule of limitation to the timeless reality. And we could say then the quantum mechanical functioning of our true unlimited being. And that multidimensionally, there's absolutely not a part of our lived experience that isn't part of that. And so that's why it infuses, as we open and deepen, the intelligence and the consciousness of life, the science, the true science of life, which sometimes gets spoken of as the Ayurveda, which is the science of life, the Veda. It's part of this living Veda, this living field of intelligence, where everything is known in the one knowing, that outside of the systems, the systemization and the expression of that, which is all beautiful, we start to open to the intelligence naturally, and we start to live according to the intelligence of our whole innate beingness that is wise and knows how to live and nourish and care for itself, support itself as a field of light, of glory, right? But it's so beautiful how this intelligence reveals itself. It reveals itself within the realms of our consciousness as we are opening. It reveals itself as an intelligence that we recognize and then naturally gets integrated into our lived experience and starts to illuminate all of the areas of the life that are unillumined. And life then, you see, keeps us at the evolutionary edge. And it brings in exactly what we need in the lived experience to be at the evolutionary edge, so that we will open to more refined intelligences that are available within the field of our knowing. But, of course, a really important part of that is seeing through the habit to try to fix and change within limitation. That when we're using the systems that are limited and born out of limitation, they'll never be able to fix what the pure intelligence can rejuvenate and refine. But we're being invited into a depth of surrender and living at this evolutionary edge where we won't realize what is possible until we surrender into the unknown and we actually jump over these edges and boundaries and limitations in our lived experience. And we actually keep taking the outstretched hand of the glory of God. We keep taking the outstretched hand that will pull us into dimensions of our lived experience that are as yet unexplored. And in that, we'll enter the refinements and subtleties of the frequency fields of consciousness and the light realms that are beyond and before consciousness, that we will open to the divine intelligence and living truth, fields of living truth, the source codes of light, the light codes that we're absolutely wired to unfold into. We're here to know what God is, what the glory is, what the light divine is, what divinity is, and to be a living field of that frequency as a transmission field to uplift the whole in a really intelligent and quick way. It's really not about, oh, everyone has to climb their own ladder, right? It's not like I'm over here doing the work and I'm getting the glory, and everyone else, you can just go to pot, right? It's it's that as we unfold and deepen, the impact of that is a reverberant field, a blessing field, a field that reverberates and shifts the frequency of the whole. So we're carrying the whole with us always, always. And yet we are at a time where we're being deeply asked to make our allegiance with this truth, with this glory. And perhaps in different ways in the lived experience, we start to notice almost like what can be called a quickening or an amplification or a call or a pull or something that feels really like almost on the edge of an urgency, right? That we start to feel like the whole frequency field as an anticipatory field, because there is a flow, a movement in consciousness that is so alive with the potentiality that is inviting us to say yes to this, to really unravel into the inner realms of dynamism and to stop making the allegiance with the whole misunderstanding and belief in separation, and to really start to recognize in the intelligence of the knowing where in the life there's limitation, where in the life actually is limitation and a sense of holding back or a sense of a little bit of that crustiness, right? A little bit of a sense of just not quite jumping all the way in, not quite launching and breaking orbit into the fullness of what you can feel is possible. And it doesn't matter what age you are, and it doesn't matter how many years you've lived in a certain groove, and it doesn't matter what kind of body issues and complications you might think you have. There's nothing that is holding you back from the living at the evolutionary edge, but the mind's idea that this is what I am, this is where I am, this is what limits me. But what you can be sure of, that there's nothing within the worldly, projected, lived experience that limits you, but your belief in that limitation. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Not any kind of diagnosis of any kind of medical condition can limit you. Not any kind of beliefs in scarcity, not any kinds of sense of hardship or intensity in the life. There's nothing that can limit you but your own belief in that limitation. And that's what we're being dynamically invited into, is to realize that wherever we feel and find a place that feels limited, feels held back, feels challenging, tender, intense, not really fulfilled, that is the evolutionary edge of life inviting us to break orbit there, break orbit in this arena, open in such a presence to meet what is actually creating the sense of an edge or a boundary or a holding back or a limitation, is actually like a tension that wants to explode and go beyond and open to new horizons and new possibilities, that wants to be carried into the freshness and spontaneity of a life that is beyond the bounds of what the mind can imagine. There are no bounds. The infinite field is just that, infinite, pregnant with possibility and pure potentiality. And what we are here is to really be true explorers, cosmic explorers, explorers of the cosmic field of intelligence within the realms of consciousness, and to join in the field of light, the transmission field, the initiatory field, the field of activation, and to truly be intrepid in our explorations, right? How does that sound? How does that sound? How does that land in the heart as a possible excursion, right? Right? Should we go to the Bahamas on vacation, honey? Or shall we, this year, should we just open into the realms of the infinite possibility of the field of consciousness? Should we take a trip into the glory of God? Go on then, right? Sign me up. How miraculous, how miraculous. We open to the field where we don't know what is going to happen, and we don't know what life is going to look like, and we don't know on the mental level where what we think we need will come from. And that's part of the excitement. But what we do know, and what is our resource, and the only resource that's needed, is the glory of God. And here in the glory of God. All I need, great glory, is you. There's only you. There's only you. Everything, everything is yours. Nothing is mine. And in this truth, life can unfold in freedom and freshness and wild exuberance. I am yours. I am yours. And when something comes up that feels discordant or a fear or a boundary or a doubt, all I need is you, right here, right here. I meet the feelings here in you, and I transmute. I dissolve my projection. I dissolve what I have created as a limitation in my inner distillery, the inner alchemy, in the light distillery. I bring the technology of light shining upon and the all-encompassing inclusivity and non-opposing blessing of love that includes and welcomes and embraces. And I find out that as whatever feels discordance is welcomed in you, where I am one with you, that there's a smoothing, a transmutation, and a refinement that happens, where once again what felt to be divided is undivided. And I realize that this lived experience is about undividing the life. Undividing the life. Removing the blocks and obstacles and limitations. And here it is, happening in the field. The light is rushing in this moment to reveal that a transmission is here, right? The transmission is here all the time. But right now, I'm just going to express the technology because it's just what's here. So right now, the light is rushing in as the words come, removing the obstacles, the limitations. Right now, the light is rushing is actually removing the obstacles and limitations, removing the obstacles and limitations, clearing the field, activating purifications on the surface of life, clearing the field, clearing away, like sweeping. The light is sweeping through the mindscape, the mind consciousness landscape, sweeping through, just blowing away like dust, those thought constructs that are just flimsy, just blowing away the mental limitations, and then deeper sweeping, sweeping out the temple, sweeping out the temple, sweeping out the temple, and opening all the doors and windows so that the fresh air of eternal life can just blow in like a north wind, just blowing in, clearing out the temple. Light beams coming in, light beams just coming in. And in those light beams, dust particles dancing in revelation, realizing that they are free, 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 right? That kind of magic of a light beam, the dust particles, which are like the particles of consciousness just dancing in absolute freedom. And here is the light, just clearing the field, just to receive it, just to receive it. Right? Clearing away any subtle threads of not worthy, not deserving. It has to be hard. It must be harder than this. I must have to process it. I must have to work hard. I must have to spend another 10 years, processing through. No, gone, 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 right? Not a belief, not a belief. but an absolute openness within the realms of consciousness that the technology of the quantum mechanical field can just clear and purify, dissolve, refine. Receiving it, just receiving it. Mm. Mm. So much more freshness here, right? So much freshness, just so much openness, and just resting right here as a moment of infinite potentiality, right? And yet there's this glorious integrative dance in the lived human experience that multidimensionally we can have ideas of that a part of the life, like, wow, yeah, that something just ended and I am being invited into something new and I don't really know how that's going to work. And I have had that feeling, and that something new is coming in, but I don't know what it is, and I've got no idea how to manifest it. And yes, it brings fears of, am I up to it, and what is my dharma, and what is my purpose? It's like you can feel, when we're not pulling away from the gorgeous adventure of the lived experience. How does this all integrate? What is the dance of a human life? And how can the dance of a human life be lived, infused with the deeper realms of consciousness and light? How can we be vibrantly alive and awake in the cells of our lived human experience? How can our body minds be infused with light and bliss and intelligence that is way, way beyond? In a way, how can we be like a living science project? True science, the science of, light, of the glory. How can we be a living experiment, a living project? And it's really about letting the lived experience be very integrative. Let it be fun. Let there be a seeing of how it's actually very practical in a certain sense. It's not abstract. We're not speaking about transcending and kind of floating around in an ethereal way, although there are realms of our lived experience that can feel very purely transcendent and ethereal. But what we're being invited into in wholeness and in the lived human experience is to bring the transcendent and the immanent together as an emergent field of wholeness. That our human expression is supposed to be a lived human expression of divinity. But we're actually broadcasting and living something that has never actually been lived before in this way. Right? We're like a new breed of human. And yet we could say, on a certain level, that there are beings that have lived this, but never lived it quite the way that we are going to live it, because it's always fresher. And so, in a way, the field of siddhas, the field of saints and sages and mystics that are here always as light, that have perhaps been embodied and walked in human lives, and some multidimensionally even are, right, as avatars. So how can our lived experience be infused with this light? How can we be inspired and ignited and initiated through the intelligence of what consciousness has lived through to evolve and receive the living edge frequency and light codes of what has already been evolved and continues to evolve in the light realms, how can we be infused with this and let our whole lived multidimensional experience be infused and activated so that our lived experience can be absolutely an evolutionary edge that's not personal, but like a collective evolutionary edge, that we're truly being a field of light, truly being a field of light. And yet we look the same, and we get to integrate that in our lived experience in all the ways that we're speaking of, that we realize that life is living itself and is constantly at this evolutionary edge, so that then we translate that into our lived experience as, okay, well, where in the life are there challenges? Where in the life do I feel limited? What is hard? Where am I not free? And we realize, okay, well, there's an edge. Where is there processing happening? Where is there a place where I don't really know how? And what is being invited here, right? This is the glory of the intelligence of life, is that it's living itself intelligently. And so we start to inhabit more of our multidimensional capacity, and we start to live in these realms of deep divine light codes and patternings that are all within our inner technology and consciousness, intelligence, fields of intelligent light, resonant frequencies, and frequencies that we can access and bring online. So what's happening in the field now is that the deep structuring of the deep structuring, let's say, of the intelligence on a cellular level, like the DNA structurings are being activated with finer frequencies of light according to what the consciousness and the cellular intelligence can receive, completely unique within each being. There's a restructuring and a reorganizing at a cellular level of the intelligence, opening to a greater capacity to receive and to activate frequencies that are like spinning in every cell and every atom simultaneously, so multidimensionally spinning, almost like a divine centrifuge or something, spinning. And in that spinning is reconfiguring discordance and up leveling and upgrading the frequency codes to the next possible refinement. You might even feel in the field of light, because we're on some level now accustomed to recognizing the sound that comes through the crystal bowl, that the sound that we're used to are the light frequencies. So you might even feel, as the light frequency transmission is moving and upgrading and refining, you might feel those frequencies of light and almost feel the resonance, as if you can hear the sound. Because the sound is never just sound, the sound is light. And what I'm being shown here is how the initiation through using the sound as light frequency transmission has been used as a way of you being able, of us all being able to receive and actually have a more subtle ability to notice the resonances of light as refinements are happening. And it doesn't matter if you don't notice, because the same refinement is happening, but you might just feel as if you can almost hear the sound. But you realize that the sound was never sound, that it's always transmission. It's always light transmission. Mm. Mm. So the frequencies are just moving and rippling into the cells, refining and upgrading the intelligence and clearing away the discordance and that which no longer serves. And according always to the laws of karma, that everything is working in complete collaboration, of course, multidimensionally. Just to receive it. Just to receive it. Mm. Mm. You might feel or sense or recognize like a deepening, enlivening of the sense of the silence as a frequency, as a resonance, like a piercing, pulsing, high-pitched, silent sound. And that very high-pitched, if you are aware of it, that very high-pitched frequency is like a laser beam of light. And that laser beam of light is now just scanning the frequency field of each of us and is targeting, offering like targeted, laser sharp illuminations and refinements. It's particularly focused around the brain and the glands. And it's moving down, it's scanning through the body, moving down. It's bringing a big illumination, infusion into the heart, opening like a field. Like many, many laser sharp beams just scanning and focusing illuminating, bringing the power of illumination, very focused illumination. And now it's rooting, bringing almost like such a bright light in the rooting. It's almost like a blue pearlescent light. Very, very bright. It's it's spreading out like the still lake, rooting in that stillness, in the silence. So now the light is just flooding in like a big flood of love, a flood of unconditional love, like the love of the mother, the divine mother, like just a huge flood, just flooding through the whole system, through the body, all around the body, just flooding through like the most profound frequency of embrace, of holding, of safety, of feeling seen and held and known in and as the love that you are. You may just feel it as a sense of just a relaxation, like a dropping back into such an embrace. You may feel it just resonating or vibrating just through the whole body and the whole field. It's soft, it's so soft, enveloping and wrapping itself in and through the cells and the systems, and just a quality of enveloping, and it's also spiraling. It's moving in spirals. And it's revealing itself now more like a crystalline. And in the crystalline light, the rainbow flashes are just spiraling, spiraling, spiraling. And that spiraling is the frequency of wholeness, the crystalline frequency field of wholeness. So just receive it, the frequency field of wholeness, the transmission and opening to the frequency field of the whole field is the transmission of wholeness, perfect, spotless love, and a knowing of the wholeness that you are, that you belong to, the glory, the light, the wonder, the awe, and the love.